talking about Ghana's decentralization process. And we're privileged to be joined by a governance expert. Of course, you know him as the Director General of the Institute of Internal Auditors, but he's also a lawyer, chartered accountant, and a governance expert. He used to be the Dean of Graduate Studies at the Institute of Local Government Studies. Dr. Eric Oduro. Good morning, Doc, and thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning, Winston, and thank you for having me.
Great. Before we start the conversation, listen to the Greater Accra Regional Minister, Henry Korte.
Have you been hardworking?
Yes.
With Abubuya still on the motorway? Can we say he's hardworking? Well, let's answer the questions. Is it hardworking? Chocho is still loading around Accra Mall. Is hardworking? Korte. Rubbish around Graphic Road. Hardworking. AMA. Kimbu, Tudu, everywhere, rubbish. Hardworking. I want us to mark ourselves. Honorable Abana, Agbogbolshi has been turned into a refuse dump. Is it hardworking? Are you aware? The place we cleared, that people are still dumping refuse there. They have stopped. Since when? I can't hear you. Last month. Do you know the dates we did this exercise at Agbogbolshi? 2 years. And it took you last month to stop them from dumping refuse. I'm not too excited about coming to read hard work. Yeah. Lejokuku Ladadekotopon, Ashaman, Tema West. We talked about Abubuya on the motorway. They are still plying the motorway. They are. I also West Wogon. They are actually Accra Mall. It's like that. In fact, Lada Dekotopo, just in front of ex-President John Mahama's house, somebody has started selling onions and tomatoes. Unbelievable. We are fighting over who collects revenue at Palace Mall. And as the contractor continues to work, the median has become a place for organizer, trotro, mechanics. Every day I talk about it. MCE is not feeling well every day. So how do I read the speech?
So, Dr. Oduro, that's the Greater Accra Regional Minister asking his MMDCs, are you working? And the question is, are the district assemblies delivering on their development mandate? Dr. Oduro.
Thank you very much, Winston. I think hearing the Greater Accra Regional Minister speak, that is how a leader should speak. He's spoken the truth. He was putting his chief executives on the chopping board, drawing their attention to what exactly they have been engaged to do. That is what I would expect all regional ministers to be doing. We should not be sitting in our offices. We should go out there and get people to do what they need to do. Secondly, chief executive should not even have allowed the regional regional minister to get to them at this level, because the Local Governance Act is clear on what every chief executive and every metropolitan, municipal, and district assembly is supposed to do. The essence of our decentralization is to bring governance, and not only governance, but good governance closer to the people, so that the president will be free to concentrate on core serious national issues. The regions are expected to coordinate this development. Unfortunately, the story the regional minister is telling us is the situation on the ground. But all is not lost. I think that we have to cracking the whip, and we have to crack it harder.
Before we crack the whip, Dr. Oduro,
all of us have.
Dr. Oduro, before we crack the whip, you've made reference to the law. The law is clear. It says the district assemblies are responsible for the total development of their districts. They are responsible for infrastructure also. Why don't we see these things in our districts?
Two things, Winston. One, the assemblies are expected to mobilize adequate resources to support what central government brings to them. 2, it is about leadership, because the name chief executive was not given to them for nothing. When you look at the historical antecedents of our local government and decentralization system, chief executive is expected to manage a local area like a business to bring development, like you said. So it is also an issue about leadership. Now, if all chief executives will not armchair chief executives and move out there and see what is happening and then take action, we will not be where we are today. Apart from that, we also have assembly members whose duties include giving feedback to the General Assembly, even if the chief executive does not know. So what I think should happen is that the blame should be on the chief executive because they are leaders, but I think all the structures should be whipped into action. This is not to say that all of them are culpable. In fact, some chief executives are doing their very best to put their assemblies on good footing. Others are also doing armchair administration, and that is how come some are suffering, and it will have to take the regional minister to come and crack the whip.
Talking about leadership and talking about resource mobilization, yes, you're right, but is it also not the case, for instance, that even in the law, there's a provision where government transfers, a key aspect of fiscal decentralization? You have the minister able to determine in Accra how certain funds should be used, and sometimes taking these funds and using them on behalf of district assemblies. Doesn't that in itself prevent them access to funds which they so badly need for the development of their localities?
Okay, let me clarify that bit. The minister does not take funds in Accra. The minister does not direct areas where funds are supposed to be used. Within the Local Governance Act and the Constitution, the minister, working with the administrator of common fund, provides what we call guidelines. And this guideline is expected to guide in the utilization of the common fund. Now, the guidelines are areas of development that have been agreed upon. There are 2 areas. There are generic areas that are needed across the country, and there are locally specific areas of need of the respective assemblies that are supposed to be in the guidelines. Now, in the Local Governance Act and in our local governance system, the District Assembly's Common Fund is not the only source available to local government. When you look at the Act, the law says not less than 5% of national revenue, and that not less than 5% of national revenue cannot even finance averagely 40% of the development needs of the local government in Ghana. That is why there is a provision for IGF mobilization by the respective local government. In fact, before a local government area would be created, 2 conditions would have to be satisfied. 1, the ability of the local government area to mobilize additional revenue to support what central government will bring for development. And then 2, the fact that that area will not affect governance. These are the 2 things. They should be economically viable. What I see happening is that even if the DACM component that goes to the assemblies are not enough, what happens to the IGF that they are supposed to mobilize? That's why I'm saying that it is a leadership issue. Yes, there is a financial issue, because if government is not mobilizing enough, 5% of government revenue would definitely not be enough to finance development. So it is a national conversation we should have. But I have always made a proposal that we should use a scientific basis to cost the development needs of the local government and transfer an amount equal to what they need to develop. Because the not less than 5% figure that was fixed in the Constitution for common fund has no scientific basis. So nobody has costed how much, for instance, Accra Metropolitan Assembly needs to develop the area. So the money is transferred. It is not enough. They are not able to generate enough. Then we leave a big development gap. So we need a national conversation on that subject. But before that, we tackle the leadership issues. We make sure that the guidelines that goes goes into areas that would help them to meet their immediate needs, whilst in the medium to long term, we resolve the funding gap issue. So from day one, there is a development funding gap because the common fund has no scientific basis to determine the actual funds that local government needs for development.
Well, my guest this morning is Dr. Eric Oduro, who is a governance expert. He's also a lawyer and a chartered accountant. We're having a conversation about, Ghana's decentralization process. Our focus really is on the performance of the district assemblies. But you've raised another point. You've raised an important point about, the funding, the financing. You've talked about the, common fund not being enough. So based on your own analysis, what percentage should be enough for the districts?
Based on my analysis and research I did about 5 years ago, I think that if the common fund is raised to about 40% of total national revenue, it will help. Again, the common fund allocation has a formula, but I also think that we should look at the ingredients or the variables used in the common fund formula again, because you have responsive factor, you have equality factor, you have service delivery factor. Now, these factors favor the big metropolitan areas, but the essence of the common fund is to rather support the rural district assemblies to be able to develop. And because the common fund formula favors the metropolitan assemblies, it is making some metropolitan and municipal assemblies lazy in revenue mobilization. So I think that we would have to, we should work towards increasing it to 40%, because Article 252 of the Constitution sets only the lower limit, not the upper limit. The Constitution says not less than 5% of total national revenue. So if we can transfer not less than 40% of total national revenue to local government and review the common fund formula so that it will favor the rural assemblies and then push the urban and then metropolitan assemblies to increase their IGF to support what central government brings, it will help. There is also another fund, DDF, the District Development Facility or Fund. That one too is based on assessment. If the assemblies performs well, they pass the DDF, additional funding is given to them. Now, when you look at the indicators of the DDF or the D part, the indicators are such that there are a lot of measures that an assembly needs to put in place. So if you are a rural assembly and you are not able to pull your weight, you will not get the DDF, the common fund, you will not get enough. When it comes to the IGF, you don't have the capacity to mobilize. So that is how come we see some assemblies just not developing. So we have to address this funding issue. But my proposal would be, let us start with 40% of total national revenue given to the local government, and then let us allow them to perform the functions given to them by law.
40%, is that not too much?
It's not too much, because decentralization means transferring the power, authority, and functions that ordinarily central government would perform to local government. So all what we need to do is, let us cost what is the function of the functions given to the local government. Central government was performing this function previously. They should just add that money together and send it to the local government. So 40% is just not too much. When you go to countries like Uganda, they have what we call conditional grant and unconditional grant. And they are nearing this 40% I am proposing. With the conditional grant concept, the money they give to you, they give it to you to use it in areas that has been agreed upon nationwide. So maybe if in Ghana we said it is hospitals that we need, then they will give you a conditional grant. Every district assembly will then have to build one hospital within a year. So across the country in a year, we can have 261 hospitals. Every district will have a hospital. That's the conditional grant.
Okay.
Then the unconditional grant will be given to you, the local government, to use it for your specific needs. What do you think are your immediate needs? So then we take care of all of them. But the way it is, this not less than 5% thing is really not helping. And there is no scientific basis. I stand to be corrected. Because the cost of the functions of district assemblies is not up to, it's even more than the not less than 5% national revenue we have. So we really need a national conversation. But I would propose we should start with 40% of total national revenue, send it to the assemblies. But in doing that, let us strengthen control systems. Let us strengthen internal audit. Let us strengthen supervision. Let us strengthen transparency. Let us strengthen accountability so that we'll make sure that the funds we transfer there would be used for the intended purposes.
Great. Before you go, I know you would have to leave shortly, but we've also been joined by Dr. Nicholas Awortwi, who's director of the Institute of Local Government Studies. Okay, he's not on yet. We'll get to him. But let me take you to Section 1253 of Act 936. It says, the minister shall, in consultation with the minister responsible for finance, determine the category of expenditure of the approved development budget of district assemblies that must in each year be met out of the amounts received by the district assemblies from the district assemblies common fund. Doesn't this in itself defeat the very purpose of decentralization, where you are expecting decision making to be at the subnational government level?
That provision is to provide a guide. You will realize that though we are decentralizing, we are in a unitary state. Mm-hmm. And in a unitary state, you need government to provide broad directions. The specifics are indicated by the respective assemblies. In fact, by the nature of our decentralization, we operate national level ministerial realignment, we operate regional level deconcentration, which gives the regions some powers, and then the local governments are devolved units to be able to implement approved general development decisions of the country. So what the provision you just read means is that the minister responsible for local government should provide guidance to the local government so that the local government will spend the resources in areas that will not defeat national objectives. In fact, when you look at the whole system, the assemblies have the right to develop their own plans, but it will be based on a nationally agreed broad planning areas provided by the National Development Planning Commission. And the minister is expected to make sure that the resources are allocated to some of these areas. So it does not, in my view, defeat the purpose of decentralization. It provides guidance. So when people are talking about decentralization, they should look at decentralization within a unitary state and decentralization within a federal state. In our case, we are a unitary state, so national guidance is very important without undermining the autonomy of the local government to identify their development needs.
Yes, but you see, if you look at the national planning systems, we're talking about devolution even at the district level. This says the minister shall, in consultation with the minister responsible for finance, determine the category of expenditure of the approved development budget of district assemblies that must in each year be met out of the amounts received by the district assemblies from the district assemblies common fund. While your development plan is in place, yes, the minister shall determine also how you go about it, isn't it?
Well, you see, my understanding of that provision is that the minister determine the categories of expenditure. Doesn't mean the minister should determine it outside the approved national development plan. So the minister is just making sure that the categories of expenditure into which or in areas where you spend the common fund aligns with the national vision. And the national vision has been couched or developed as a result of input from even the local government. What we need to do is to make sure that these categories of expenditure provided for in the guidelines for the utilization of the common fund meet with the national aspirations provided for in the national development plan. And I see that in most cases it aligns. But this doesn't prevent the local government from also identifying where they want to spend their money. Because you realize that the framers of the law, they were very intentional. Because when you look at that provision, it does not extend to the utilization of IGF.
Yes.
So what it means is that if the assemblies have IGF, that's when they are at liberty to use the IGF in areas they think they need for their development. But for the common fund, the minister wants to be sure that you use it in line with the national development agenda.
Great. I know you'd have to leave us. So, Dr. Eric Oduro, I thank you. But we'll make time and have this conversation again. Thank you very,
Yes,
very much.
but I think my 40% will have to happen. They should increase common fund to 40% and strengthen accountability and auditing systems within the local government.
Maybe we can have a conversation about a tax sharing system subsequently.
Correct.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Eric Oduro, who is a lawyer, who is Director General of the Institute of Internal Audit Agency, and is also a chartered accountant. This is the Super Morning Show on Joy 99.7 FM. This morning, our conversation is on Ghana's decentralization process, and particularly a focus on Ghana's development, the district assemblies, taxed by the law, taxed by our decentralization process, to be in charge of the overall development of our localities or of our sub-national governments. The question you want to ask yourself is, how well have they achieved this mandate, which the law expects them to deliver on? And earlier you heard from Dr. Eric Oduro, who is a lawyer and chartered accountant, and the UPSA alumni president wants me to add that he's an alumnus of the University of Professional Studies, Accra. But we're now moving to the Institute of Local Government Studies, and we're joined by Dr. Nicholas Awortwi, who's director. Dr. Awortwi, good morning. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning, Winston.
Great. So, Dr. Awortwi, I believe you've been, listening to the Greater Accra Regional Minister questioning these MMDCs and asking them, are you hardworking? Are you delivering? The question is, are they hardworking? Are they delivering the sort of development that we expect in this country over the last 30 years of practicing this type of governance system with MMDCEs in place under the Fourth Republic? Have they delivered?
Thanks so much, Winston. Yes, I think listening to the Greater Accra Regional Minister, I think was good. He showed a leadership, and obviously we don't expect chief executives to be sitting in their offices and expecting that the work will be done. So it was a great move, and I expect many of these to happen. But the work of the assembly will have to be delivered by both the politician and the professional staff. These are two people who work at the district level. So the professional staff have responsibilities to ensure that those services are delivered, and there are a number of services that the law and our policies have given to local government to deliver. Basic services are the responsibilities of local government.
Yeah.
And so if you ask whether we have delivered basic services, obviously every morning when you listen to news and you listen to citizens complaining about services not being delivered with Abuboya on the highway, with the refuse dump all over the place, then people have reason to doubt whether we have delivered. But we have also not delivered the way the citizens expected, because we are also constrained by a number of factors, resources, powers, accountability. And some of them are issues that are constrained by the law that establishes local government and what the people can do and cannot do. What assemblies can do and cannot do are determined by the Constitution and the Act. And we have serious constraints in these laws.
Okay.
Attempts over the years to reform have not been successful. And so we are challenged. When it comes to resources as well, we are also constrained. If you go to many districts currently, they are struggling with resources from either inadequate transfers to the local government or the professional staff not able to collect what we call the local generated revenue areas. They have not been. And so we have challenges all over, even powers for them to do their work. Recently, I was in an assembly, delivering, training program, and we're encouraging them to mobilize revenue. The officers told us that they, in the past 3 years, made laws, local bylaws, to collect specific revenues. And a central politician who's a member of parliament said that they should stop that. And the professional staff stopped. This was a law that had been passed by the General Assembly.
But the MP cannot do that.
Making body. But it was stopped by a central politician. And instead of the professional staff going back to the General Assembly to either repeal the local law or to stop it or to even reform it, or they didn't, and they also stopped. So we had all sorts of challenges at the local level. And so because of that, yes, we have not delivered in a number of areas. But to what extent can you blame the local governments? You see, basically, and I'm happy you mentioned the issue of decentralization. Decentralization is the key policy that determines what assemblies can do and cannot do.
Sure.
And so people must also understand that decentralization is a zero-sum game. What is transferred to local government to do means that central governments have lost that. And nobody wants it. To be very honest, not many central politicians and bureaucrats want decentralization to succeed. So, in as much as we are practicing decentralization, there are situations where powers and resources are also taken away from local government. So, there's a whole of challenges that are facing local government, and we need to have conversation in this country about decentralization in local government.
Okay. I mean, I'll get back to you. We'll have that conversation. Dr. Nicholas Awortwi, who is director of the Institute of Local Government Studies. Okay. So let's get into our conversation again. Let's get back into the conversation on decentralization and an assessment of the performance of our district assemblies. And this morning, we're joined by Dr. Nicholas Awortwi, who is director of the Institute of Local Government Studies. And we've also been joined by Kwesi Jonah, who is Senior Research Fellow at the Institute of Democratic Governance, IDEG. Mr. Jonah, good morning, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. You're
Great.
welcome.
So let me get your views also, your preliminary thoughts on...
The line is not...
is it better now? Can you hear me?
Your line is not clear at all. I'm trying...
Okay.
Hello?
Is it better now? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
You can hear me. Okay. So I was asking for your initial assessment or thoughts on our decentralization process. You think it's working? Is delivering the kind of development we expect from it?
Well, okay. Thank you so very much. The decentralization system, if it was performing very, very well, would be excellent for the people, because this is the level of government where basic public services are delivered to the people. Education, health, sanitation, and so on and so forth. But unfortunately, we have tried the system for well over 30 years, and the people are not very happy about the results. I think in 2021, the Center for Democratic Development, CDD, Ghana, conducted a survey in which they asked the people, is the local government system serving you? And close to 78% of the people said the system is not working. And we all know that the system is not working. So this is the level of government which to help the people access basic services. But unfortunately, the majority of our people think that the system is not working.
Why is the system not working?
A lot of reasons. If you talk to the people in the local government system, they say the system has very serious financial problems. You know, they rely basically on a central government grant called the District Assemblies Common Fund.
Yes.
And this fund, according to the law, not less than 5% of total government revenue should go to them. Unfortunately, this is not working. People who have done an analysis of the actual amount that has been going to this assembly claim that over the past 5 years or so, it's just about 3% that has been going. Second, it doesn't go regularly. It's supposed to be delivered every quarter. All the assemblies complain that it doesn't go regularly. Third,
many of the assemblies could depend upon property rates. The bigger assemblies, metropolitan, some of the municipal assemblies could depend upon property rates. At the moment, I think the collection of property rates has been privatized, and it's affecting the amount of money going to the assembly. So they face so many problems, and there are other political problems associated with the running of the assembly.
We'll come to the political problems shortly, but let me get back to you, Dr. Nicholas Awortwi, because earlier you talked about the constraints. You've talked about the law. How does the law become a constraint in the performance of the functions of these district assemblies, Dr. Awortwi?
Yes. There are various sections of the law that constrain, and I want to restrict to the political side. Article 55, subsection 3, which does not allow political parties to play a role, is a major concern. The section that also does not allow DCEs to be elected directly by the people, but appointed by the president, is also a constraint to that aspect. And so you have a situation where the chief executive, who should have the powers and should be the representative of the people, is a representative of the central government. You understand? The law makes the chief executive representative of the central government. So he represents the central government. And in that case, his allegiance and accountability are all up to the center. If DCs are elected, they will make themselves more relevant and accountable to the people and will do more than what they are doing now. Yet, in 2019, that opportunity was given to us, and we let that opportunity slip by. For me, that major slip by is now coming back, to haunt us and to make our decentralization in several aspects ineffective. All these years, we have had upward accountability. When DCs are elected, look, they will not be afraid to take major decisions because they will be looking at their own survival and they will be looking at the development of their area. But if DCs are continued to be appointed, they can continue not to make themselves that accountable. And there is also little sense of agency and responsibility if they are not elected by the people. Just compare that to the members of parliament who will do anything to bring some public goods and services to the local people.
Okay.
The DCEs who are appointed, as long as they can, make themselves relevant to the central authority, they will not. And so that reform, we need to bring that conversation back. And I think the president has made that clear that if there is consensus to change article, that consensus that we can reform Article 55.3 and 243.1 and the rest, that referendum will need to come back to the table and for discussion. And I think that will be a major a game changer. To very honest, let me put it that way. That reforming that aspect of the law will be a major changer. But there are several aspects of the law. For instance, 5%, not less than 5% of the common fund. I think we can increase it. And I heard Dr. Oduro proposing 40%. Maybe that is way optimistic. That's way too high. But I think 5% is too low at this moment. Given the responsibilities that assemblies will have to, given the law, all the and lack of it is also local. And yet, we are not giving much attention to local government. For instance, there's going to be elections coming up in October 3rd or something. You hardly hear discussions on it. If we have multi-party system in our local government level. By this time, you will hear the enthusiasm. You will hear the use of the political party structures to organize people. And decentralization is basically to bring government and services closer to people. Where is the government that is closer to the people? When turnout for local elections is so low, less than 40% over all these years. And yet, when we talk about the central government election and members of parliament, we are talking about 75%. The enthusiasm there, and there's a reason for that. That is why there's need for reforms. We have, as I listened to Dr. Jonah on this, we have practiced this type of decentralization for 30 years. What is preventing us from reforming it? And that is why I'm saying that the center that has to initiate the reforms, and when I say the center, I'm not talking about the executive, I'm talking also about the members of parliament. They must initiate the process to reform the system. Okay. The system is not working. The legal constraints are just too many. So we need to reform.
Okay.
And that is why I said that these legal constraints and even accountability, there are some services that is the responsibility of local government. But the money to provide those services in the deconcentrated are sitting in the ministries. Take roads, for instance. The money supposed for to be used to maintain urban roads sit at the ministries, when that responsibility is by the districts and the urban government. Why? And these are all legal things. So
let me bring in.
We still need legal reforms.
Okay.
And that opportunity which we let slip by, we hope that will come again. It doesn't look good, but we really hope that discussions will need to come quickly.
Okay.
Otherwise, this downslope of our decentralization isn't good for anybody, and it's not delivering what the citizens expect.
Now, let me bring in Mr. Jonah in at this point. So, Mr. Jonah, do you also think that we should be thinking about increasing the percentage of the common fund? Hello, Mr. Jonah. Okay, I think we've lost Mr. Jonah. Let me get back to you. But you've also talked about, Dr. Awortwi, the resources. Now, you have internally generated funds. Isn't that enough?
No, not at all. There's nowhere in the world where local governments are fully or substantially funded from within. No, there's nowhere in the world. There are central government transfers, and there's a reason for that. If you go to some places, some poor districts, you can't even ask for property rate collection because the only good house there, a property that you can collect, are government bungalows. Only few houses there. If you look at some of the houses, you will even be ashamed of yourself to ask the people to collect, to pay property rate because the whole house is so deteriorated. There hasn't been any, say, renovation or improvement on the building for 50 years. The erosion has taken place at the foundation level. So, and there are so many places where they have very little. I've looked at some of the figures of some districts, and a whole year, the total IGF is 20,000, 30,000. Well, you can say that they are not collecting certain rent, yes, and we must also admit some of the assemblies have been lazy to collect. But even if they put 100% all their efforts, it will still not be enough to deliver the services. And so central government transfers
our own
needed.
Doing. Dr. Awortwi, the
Yes.
Constitution is clear that in creating a district, it must be economically viable. So,
Yes.
why create a district where there's no economic viability?
But it is not only economic viability. There must be also other factors.
Yes, but economic viability is part of those factors, and it's key.
It is. But what I'm also saying is, if you have an area where it is so divided ethnically, let's say language-wise, the culture of the people are so divided, and conflict are potential things that you want to remove. Creating a local government area for the people who live there is also an important consideration. And so it is not only economic viability. Sometimes you want peace. Sometimes you want, identity. Sometimes there are so many reasons. And also bringing government closer to people is a reason. And you can't bring government closer when you only talk about finance. You also talk about the way that people think, the way that people behave politically and economically and socially. So they are all factors. And if you create an area, there is a representation of the people. While if they are in a large area, that representation will be lost. So there are other reasons for creating a district, and we cannot use only politics, economic. However, the moment government creates that, it must resource that area.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, Dr. Nicholas Awortwi, thank you very, very much for joining us. We'll continue this conversation. I need to pass by campus. We have unfinished business.
Thanks so much, Winston.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nicholas Awortwi, who is Director of the Institute of Local Government Studies. Yes, that's one of my former institutions. I think I'm still there, am I not? Anyway, let's continue with the conversation. And let's this time around go to the Member of Parliament for Who Central and Deputy Ranking Member of the Local Government Committee in Parliament, Benjamin Kpodo, who has some thoughts to share, particularly about the District Assembly's Common Fund and the percentage. Honorable Kpodo, good morning. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning to you.
Great.
The discussants, as well as your listeners.
Mm-hmm. So you have some concerns, you have some thoughts to share about the Common Fund, particularly Dr. Oduro proposal that 40% should go to the assemblies. What's it?
It is true that the Constitution and our nation envisage some high level of decentralization. But this must be backed by funding.
Sure.
But what you see is that the lack of ability on the part of the local assemblies to function, mainly due to lack of funds. So where do they get the money from? Though you can talk about internally generated funds, the bulk of the money is with the District Assembly's Common Fund.
Yes.
But due to the high appetite of central government to retain funds in the center for their expenditure, they've not been regular with the disbursement of funds to the assembly. Article 252 clearly states that not less than 5% of revenues should be given to the assembly. And the amount should be disbursed in quarterly installments.
Yes.
But as we are here now, about 5 billion Ghana cedis is being owed to the District Assembly's Common Fund. So how will the Secretariat disburse funds to the assemblies to be able to execute their decentralized functions? The structure has such been re-centralized that you don't see any road works in the assemblies. Urban roads, feeder roads, highways, award contracts without the knowledge of the assemblies. They don't even give them any information as to what they have asked contractors to do. So when you go to the assemblies to ask about projects that are being undertaken from Accra, they don't know. They don't know. So we have just crippled the assemblies. And we are talking about decentralization. In fact, as you have already noted and said earlier, I had to go to court in order to prevent central government from capping this assembly's common funds.
Yeah.
Such that the 5% can be kept for the assembly. Because they wanted to cap it, take the money to the center, as they have done to the road fund, debt fund, and all other NHIS funds. So the problem is that we are talking about decentralization, but we are driving in reverse gear. We are driving in reverse gear. Take the collection of property rate, which the Constitution gives to the Assemblies, Article 245B, gives that responsibility to the Assemblies. But central government has found a way again to go and intercept the collection of property rates from the local assemblies. They have established what they call myassemblies.gov to collect property rates. And they have told the assemblies that they will be giving them 70% of whatever they collect. Well, it is good that GRA can help the assembly to raise the property rate as a source of revenue. But they have budgeted for this money to be brought to the Ministry of Finance. In 2021, they budgeted 480 million. In 2022, for this year, they have budgeted 180 million again, which means that they are eyeing property rates which the assemblies must collect in full. So right now, we were interviewing, we had engagement with some assemblies. They are telling us that what they have been collecting in the years 2020, 2021 are far higher than what they have been given this year, 2023. So we really have to be serious when we talk about decentralization. Education, roads, legal affairs and all that, they are supposed to be decentralized, but they are still being held at the center. This is the problem we have.
So what do we do? How can we get things right? What must be done? Before you get to that point, first, do you agree with Dr. Oduro that we should consider increasing even the District Assembly's Common Fund, the percentage? Even if they attempted capping, how about 40%?
No, you see, first of all, let's look at the 5%. How is it going? It is not working because the money is first collected into the consolidated fund and sent to Bank of Ghana. But the transfer to the this Assembly's Common Fund, it has become a task. You have to argue, you have to threaten, you have to go to court before even the 5%. So when you are talking about 40%, it's a wild joke. It's a wild joke. Let's see how the 5% works out.
So you don't believe that that's something that is achievable?
Giving 40% of total revenue to the assembly?
Yes, so they can then be in charge of the development as the law mandates them to be in charge of?
I'm wondering whether this central government is going to even think of increasing it. If you look at the history, the Constitution says maximum 5%. Or not less than 5%.
Not less than, minimum 5%.
Minimum 5%. Then, during President Kufuor's time, it was raised to 7.5%. And President Mahama continued with it. But when this government came, it brought it back to 5% and went ahead to cap it. So you will see that the desire for central government, which is often the initiator of decentralization processes, is to keep the money at the center so that they'll have control. They don't want these assemblies to have control over their affairs. The chief executives are sitting down there. That is why when the regional, Greater Accra regional minister was asking questions to the chief executives, they will respond that yes, but what can they do? They can't do anything. They don't have the resources. And don't ever, as someone said earlier, think that the local government and the assemblies can generate enough revenue to run their affairs. No. We are thinking only of places like Accra, Kumasi, Sekendita, Kwesi, but not in the other smaller assemblies. In fact, some district assemblies don't even have markets. They don't have markets to collect daily tolls from traders. So you see, we must come back to the point that the framers of our constitution know that central government can raise the money and disburse to the assembly. And therefore, let's go by that one first. Then when we see that it is working well, then we can increase the rate. But as of now, it's a pitiable thing that the assemblies don't have money. Some of them are sitting there, they go to work and do nothing.
But finally, I mean, the common fund, you're in parliament. These are monies that should be released. What are you doing? These are statutory funds that must be transferred. Government transfers is a key pillar of fiscal decentralization. So why aren't you insisting that it's done?
You see, when you ask that, then it appears you are not following us. We have held sessions with the Minister for Finance. We have raised questions. Sometimes he doesn't even want to come to Parliament to answer questions. We've invited him to the local government committee meetings. He failed to turn up. So it's when we are carrying out major general debates on the floor that we point to that. Our leaders have gone to the Minister for Finance to request the ministry to release the funds to the assembly. But sometimes they convince them that they don't have money at the center. Look at what is happening. DDEP, this and that.
Well, finally, I mean, you've indicated you would march to the Bank of Ghana if the governor doesn't resign. If the finance minister is not releasing funds that you believe are critical,
finance releases the funds.
You should.
Some of us have even suggested that there should be an automatic transfer system, so that the funds that are dedicated for the common fund, as soon as they hit the Bank of Ghana account, the 5% should be transferred to the common fund account. We have made these suggestions, but the ministry is refusing to take it.
Well, Honorable Benjamin Kpodo, thank you very, very much for joining us. This is just the beginning of this conversation.